All right, so today we're diving into Plato's Republic, which I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It really is. And, we've had a lot of listeners, requesting this one for a while. So
It's a classic for a reason.
it really is.
Yeah.
And the thing about the Republic is it's kind of a monster, right? Like it's one of those, you try to pick it up and
You need like a whole summer to get through it.
yeah, exactly. So we're going to try to break down like the key ideas.
Give you the highlight reel.
Exactly. So that you can, at your next dinner party, sound like a total philosophy buff.
Exactly.
Now, the article you sent, it starts off, which I think is a good place to start, with like, who was Plato, right?
Yeah.
Not just some name on a, philosophy textbook.
Right, he wasn't just born like fully formed with a beard stroking away thinking about justice.
Exactly. So he was born in Athens, like way back in the day. And get this, he was a student of Socrates.
Talk about a tough act to follow.
Right. Imagine like having Socrates as your professor. Okay, but here's what I think is really interesting. Plato didn't just like write straight up essays.
More like plays, right?
Yeah. Dialogues. Like imagine if your philosophy textbook was like a bunch of characters just arguing back and forth.
It's way more engaging than just reading someone's like dry theories. You get to see the ideas unfold.
Yeah. It's like we're dropped right into like a symposium in ancient Athens, eavesdropping on their philosophical smackdown.
Exactly. And the article really emphasizes how important that is for understanding his work.
Okay, so we've got Plato, our philosopher playwright.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the Republic. What were the big questions he was wrestling with?
I mean, the big one right out the gate is justice. Like, what is it? Both for us as individuals and for, like, society as a whole.
Right, what does it even mean to be just?
Exactly. And then he takes it even further. Like, how do we create a truly just society? And that's where he gets really ambitious. He's like, okay, let's just build a perfect city from scratch.
From the ground up, right.
Mm-hmm.
And see what happens.
Exactly. And let me tell you, things get interesting.
I bet. So where does he even start? Like, what are the building blocks of Plato's utopia?
Well, he divides his ideal city into three main groups.
Yeah.
You've got your rulers, your guardians, and your producers.
Okay, so it's like a social hierarchy, but with, a philosophical twist.
Right. And each group has its own special role to play based on, like, their natural skills and personalities.
Okay, so let's break down these VIP sections. First up, the rulers. Who are these guys?
In Plato's mind, the rulers are the ones with the most wisdom, the deepest knowledge. They're like the philosopher kings and queens.
I love that, the philosopher kings. It does have a nice ring to it, but I'm guessing it's not just about, wearing fancy robes and bossing people around.
No, not for Plato. It's not about power tripping. The perfect ruler, in his view, is someone who's dedicated their life to, like, seeking truth. They're driven by knowledge and this deep sense of justice.
Okay, so forget politicians. We need philosophers in charge. Makes sense to me. Now, what about the guardians? Are these the brave warriors protecting everyone?
Exactly. They're the protectors, carefully chosen and, like, seriously trained to defend the city. But it's not just about being physically strong. They also need to be courageous, disciplined, totally loyal.
Okay, so they're like the ethical warriors, fighting for justice and all that. Pretty cool. But what about everybody else? The people who aren't, philosophers or warriors, where do they fit in?
That's where the producers come in. They're the ones keeping the city running. The farmers, the craftspeople, the merchants.
Okay, so like the backbone of the city, making sure everyone has what they need.
Exactly. They provide all the essentials, which allows the rulers to rule and the guardians to guard.
Okay, I'm seeing how this is all coming together. Everybody's got their part to play. Though there was one thing in this article about the guardians that really threw me off. It said something about them not having private property.
Yeah, that's one of the more, shall we say, controversial parts of the Republic.
It did kind of make me do a double take, like, wait, what?
Right. So Plato thought that private property and even traditional families could make people selfish.
Like it would create division.
Exactly. And he wanted his ideal city to be super unified, harmonious. So he basically said, nope, not for the guardians.
Wow. That's a pretty radical idea, even for like a thought experiment. So they'll just share everything.
Basically. He thought it would keep the guardians focused on their duty. Protecting the city, upholding its values.
I mean, I can see how that would eliminate some distractions. But I have to say, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It definitely makes you think, that's for sure.
It does. So we've got this picture of Plato's perfect city with these three different groups, each playing a vital role. But how does this all relate back to us as individuals? Like, what's the connection between this ideal city and, our own messy everyday lives.
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Plato uses the city as an analogy for the human soul.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. How does that work?
He says, just like there are those 3 classes in the city, there are 3 parts to our souls. There's reason, spirit, and appetite.
All right, I'm hooked. Tell me more about these 3 parts of the soul.
Okay, so imagine this. Reason is like the wise ruler of your inner city.
I'm with you.
It's the part of you that seeks truth, knowledge, understanding. It helps you make sense of the world, guides you towards what's right.
So if reason's the ruler, where does spirit fit into all of this?
Spirit. That's like your city's courageous protector.
Okay, I like it.
It's the part driven by courage, a sense of honor, justice. It pushes you to stand up for your beliefs, fight for what's right, even when it's hard.
It's like that inner warrior, right? Always ready to defend what's important.
Exactly. And then there's appetite. And this part is super relatable, right? This is the part of us that wants pleasure, wants satisfaction, wants it now. Good food, exciting experiences, all the good stuff.
Okay, yeah, appetite. I think I'm very well acquainted with that part of myself.
Right, we all are. But just like in the city, if appetite is allowed to run wild, it's going to cause chaos.
Yeah, it'd be like a city overrun by like cookie monsters and I don't even know what else.
Exactly, not a pretty picture. So just like in Plato's city, balance is key.
So we've got to find that harmony between reason, spirit, and yes, even appetite. It's about integrating all these different parts of ourselves.
Right. And that's where Plato's concept of justice comes in. A just person is someone who's mastered that inner harmony. Reason's in charge, spirit's backing it up, and appetite's, well, hopefully not throwing too much of a tantrum.
It's like a delicate balancing act.
It really is.
So how do we actually do that? Cultivate that kind of inner harmony? Because it honestly sounds like kind of a lifelong project.
Yeah.
It's the $1,000,000 question, right?
Yeah.
How do we cultivate that inner harmony? I mean, it sounds great in theory, but like, how do we actually live it?
Well, it's definitely not easy.
Yeah, no kidding.
But the article does touch on this, and it gets into Plato's whole theory of the forms, which, fair warning, can get a little heady.
Yeah, the forms. That's definitely where things took a turn into like, whoa, for me.
It's a mind bender, that's for sure. But stick with me, because it's worth wrapping your head around. So imagine for a second that there's this whole other realm beyond the physical world, right? And in this realm, you have these perfect, unchanging concepts. Things like justice, beauty, truth, goodness. Those are the forms.
Okay, so there's like this higher level of reality, a realm of pure ideas that exists outside of like our everyday experience. Am I getting that right?
You got it. And Plato thought these forms were more real, in a way, than the physical world itself. Think about it. Have you ever seen a perfectly straight line in nature?
Not really. I'm not sure I have.
Exactly. Or experienced pure, unchanging justice in the real world?
Definitely not. It always feels like there's like more to the story.
Right. So what we experience in our lives, it's just an imperfect reflection of those perfect forms. Plato uses this analogy of like seeing shadows on a cave wall versus seeing the actual objects themselves.
Okay, yeah, that analogy always helps me. It's like we're those cave dwellers mistaking the shadows for the real thing. And the true essence of things, those forms, they're hidden from our view.
You're getting it. And just like those cave dwellers would be blown away if they ever saw the real objects casting those shadows, Plato believed that we, through reason, through philosophy, we can catch glimpses of those forms.
It's like those aha moments, those flashes of insight where something suddenly clicks and you're like, oh, I get it now. Those are glimpses into the world of forms.
You got it. It's like a little peek behind the curtain of reality. And for Plato, the highest form of all, the one that like illuminates everything else, is the form of the good.
The form of the good. That sounds pretty major. But how does understanding these forms, these kind of abstract concepts, help us actually live better lives? Because it still feels a bit, I don't know, theoretical.
I get that. But here's the thing. Remember that inner harmony we were talking about, that balance of reason, spirit, and appetite?
Yeah, getting all those parts of ourselves to play nice together.
Exactly. So Plato believed that by aligning ourselves with the forms, by striving to live according to those higher principles, that's how we achieve that inner harmony.
So it's about letting those perfect, unchanging concepts guide our actions, our decisions in the real world.
Exactly. It's like imagine trying to build a house without a blueprint, right?
That would not go well.
Chaos. Total construction nightmare. But the forms, they're like our philosophical blueprint. They give us a framework for living a just and fulfilling life. When we try to embody those virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, we're basically creating more harmony in our own inner city, you know?
Okay, that's a really good way to put it. It's not just about understanding the forms intellectually. It's about living them, making choices that reflect those higher principles, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And that's where the real work begins, right? It's one thing to like read about this stuff. It's another thing entirely to actually put it into practice.
Oh, absolutely. Living a perfectly just life, embodying those forms every second. Sounds like a tall order.
It's a lifelong journey, that's for sure. And Plato knew that. He wasn't naive to how tough it is. He doesn't give us like this simple rule book. Instead, he's giving us a framework to think about these challenges, to understand the forces at play within ourselves and in the world around us.
It's like he's giving us the tools, but then it's up to us to use them, to actually do the work of building that inner harmony. But here's what I'm curious about. If striving for this inner harmony, this alignment with the forms, is so crucial, what happens when we don't? What happens when societies or individuals stray from that path? What are the consequences of letting our lower impulses call the shots?
That's another key part of the Republic. Plato dives into what he calls deviant regimes, political systems that have basically fallen away from that ideal of justice. And he lays out a kind of decline. It starts with what he calls timocracy, where honor and military glory become the most important things.
So instead of being led by wisdom and a love of knowledge, like those philosopher kings, a timocracy is ruled by people who are, like hungry for recognition and power.
Exactly. And Plato thought that this shift in values, where it's all about external validation instead of inner virtue, it's ultimately going to lead to instability and conflict.
It's like that classic line, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. A society built on ego and ambition, that's going to crumble eventually.
Exactly. And from there, from timocracy, he argues that things can actually degenerate even further into oligarchy. And that's where the love of wealth reigns supreme. It's a system where the few, the wealthy elite, exploit everyone else for their own gain.
And I'm guessing Plato wasn't exactly a fan of oligarchy.
Let's just say he wasn't throwing any parties in their honor. He saw it as fundamentally unjust and unstable. It just breeds resentment, conflict, you name it.
Right, because when money is the most important thing, justice and fairness, they kind of go out the window. But then where does democracy fit into all of this? Isn't that supposed to be like the best form of government?
It is now, largely. But Plato had a more, let's say, complicated view of democracy. He saw it as kind of a double-edged sword.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, he recognized the appeal, the freedom, the potential for equality, all of that. But he also worried about its excesses.
So it's like too much is a good thing can be a bad thing.
Exactly. He was worried that without the guidance of wisdom and reason, without a shared commitment to the common good, democracy could easily devolve into chaos, like mob rule, basically.
He's like everyone's shouting their opinions, but no one's listening, and eventually it all just falls apart.
That was his fear, for sure, and he believed that this kind of societal breakdown, where there's no shared values, no real sense of purpose, it creates the perfect conditions for tyranny.
Tyranny, yeah, that takes us to a whole other level. What was Plato's take on that?
He saw it as the most unjust and destructive form of government, period. It's where one person, the tyrant, driven by their own selfish desires, holds all the power.
Like the classic saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it seems like with this whole spectrum of, let's call them not so ideal societies, Plato's really trying to warn us about what happens when we lose sight of that balance, that justice that he's put forth as the ideal.
100%. He's showing us what happens when we get our priorities mixed up, when we let our lower impulses guide our actions, both as individuals and as a society.
It's definitely a sobering thought, but also a powerful reminder of why that inner harmony, that striving towards the forms, is so essential. It's like he's saying, hey, look, building a just society, it starts with you. It's about taking ownership of our own inner world.
Right. It's about recognizing that inner harmony, the alignment with those higher principles. That's where true justice begins.
It's not enough to just like read Plato and go, oh yeah, the forms, those are cool. We have to actually live it, make those tough choices that reflect those higher principles, even when it'd be easier to just, give in to those lower impulses.
It's like the difference between like listening to a beautiful piece of music and actually learning to play it yourself. It takes effort. It takes practice.
Totally. You got to put in the work. Speaking of which, I'm curious, if Plato could see our modern societies, what do you think he'd say? Would he give us a passing grade on the whole justice front?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think he'd probably see a mix. to be honest. Like, on the one hand, I think he'd be impressed with how much emphasis we put on things like individual rights, freedom of speech, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he'd probably give us props for that.
Right. But on the other hand, I think he'd probably be pretty concerned with, how much we prioritize individual gain over the common good.
Yeah, it does feel like we're kind of obsessed with like me these days.
Right. And I think he'd see that as a recipe for disharmony, both within ourselves and in society as a whole.
It's a good reminder that building a just society, it's not like a one and done deal. It's an ongoing process. And that goes for our own inner work too. It's a lifelong journey.
It really is. We're always evolving, learning, trying to become more aligned with those higher principles.
It's about embracing that journey of self-discovery. Looking inward, asking those tough questions, challenging our own beliefs and actions to see if they're really in line with the best version of ourselves, the kind of world we want to live in.
Exactly. And that's what makes Plato so relevant, even today. He's not giving us all the answers, but he's giving us the tools to ask the right questions, to challenge our assumptions, to never stop seeking wisdom.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Republic, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this? What's that philosophical nugget they can carry with them?
If there's one thing I hope, it's this. Don't be afraid to question, to challenge, to strive for something greater than yourself. Engage with the world, with your community, with your own inner life, with a sense of curiosity, courage, and a deep commitment to justice.
Beautifully said. It's like Plato's whispering to us across the centuries, saying, hey, go build those just cities. Not just out there in the world, but within yourselves too.
Thanks for joining us on this philosophical adventure. Until next time, keep out.
Wake up with purpose, feel that fire in your chest. Life's a gift, man, breathe it in, give it your best. Stars in the sky, a mirror of what's inside. Change is the game, let your spirit be your guide.
So raining on unbreakable, that's the key. Control your thoughts, find the strength to set yourself free. Opinions flying, world full of noise and stress. The truth lies within you, put your soul to the test.
Anger burns hot, but revenge leaves you cold. Kindness is the weapon, that's how the story's told. Don't judge a book by its cover, look deeper instead. Find the good in everyone, let that wisdom spread.
So raining on unbreakable, that's the key. Control your thoughts, find the strength to set yourself free. Opinions flying, world full of noise and stress. The truth lies within you, put your soul to the test.
Yeah, they try to knock you down, throw obstacles your way, but you rise above the drama, find peace every day. The happiness of your life depends on the quality of thoughts. Keep that fire burning bright, the power you got.
Stoic, mind unbreakable, that's the key. Control your thoughts, find the strength to set yourself free. Opinions flying, world full of noise and stress. Truth lies within you, put your soul to the test.
Fate throws the curveball, but you adapt, never fold. The past is gone, the future untold. Live in the moment, that's where the true power lies. A stoic warrior, wisdom in your eyes. If it is not right, do not do it, keep it real. The soul becomes sky with the color of its thoughts. How you feel?
Stoic, oh, unbreakable, find the strength within.
You got this, no doubt, the victory you'll win. Critics talk loud, try to dim your inner light, but they ain't worth your time, rise above the petty fight. Remember, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Stay true to your path, keep your integrity intact. It's not death a man should fear, but never beginning to live. So seize the day, let your spirit soar, got so much to give. Focus on the good, leave the negativity behind. Stoic warrior state of mind, that's the legacy you'll find.
You've started a whole new process called a whole new life. And if you keep up that process, not only with your health habits, but with your money habits and with your communication habits, with your sales habits and management habits and every other habit that you've got, if you'll start that process, eliminate the errors and replace it with disciplines practiced, I'm telling you, you can start this process of life change immediately. After today, you don't ever have to be the same again. Only by choice. Errors in judgment, disaster. Few simple disciplines, wealth beyond imagination. Let the miracle of everything that's available work for you, and start working on the inside. Work on your philosophy, work on your attitude, work on your personality, work on your language, work on the gift of communication, work on all of your abilities. And if you'll start making those personal changes, I'm telling you, everything will change for you. Work on yourself. Then you bring more value to the partnership, to the marriage, to the franchise, to the corporation, to the enterprise, to the community, to the nation. Self-development, personal development. The best contribution you can make to someone else is self-development. Not hasty if it isn't required, but don't lose much time. Here's the time to act. When the idea is hot and the emotion is strong. That's the time to act. Don't use the excuses they use. It's called the language of the poor. Switch gears, switch language, switch ideas, switch strategy. Start with the simplest of disciplines. And don't be mean any of these disciplines. The smallest of disciplines starts the process of life change. And if you'll invest in this thing called discipline, you can have whatever you wish. It's called the beginning of a miracle. If you will get better, everything will get better for you. What a clear message that was for me. He said, if you'll change your philosophy, if you'll change your habits, if you'll refine your thinking, if you'll change and accept some new disciplines, if you'll turn the corner where you've been in the past, go for a new life for the future, he said all kinds of remarks.
Anyone who can make you angry becomes your master. When you're testing to see how deep water is, never use 2 feet.
The soul is eternal and imperishable. It is not subject to birth or death. Bhagavad Gita.
Be impatient with actions, but patient with results. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. For it is only when he is alone that he is really free.
The past is gone, the future is not here. Now I am free of both. Right now, I choose joy. Deepak Chopra.
I'm very aware how quick life can take from you, and I've always prepared my mind for the next chapter. And what happened with me was I started this thing called front loading. So when I was young, I used to be a little piece of shit. Oh, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I can't do that. But the second I got my head out of my ass and I realized, man, you can achieve a lot of if you get off your ass and you start moving and you start motivating yourself. Start becoming a self-motivator. So I started front loading. And front loading is people, man, you've done so much by 47 because I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring me. So my military resume is fat. You know, I did a lot in the military. I did a lot outside the military. I've made money. I've done almost every race out there, hard race in the world. I've broken pull-up records. I've done a lot of shit. So when these bad times come, and also not like only that, like work your ass off so you can enjoy. Yeah, you're taking a shot. You know, you may not live to be old, but what if you do? And you worked your ass off when you were able, and you were able to get up early, able to grind. If you front load it properly, the back half of your life is money. And that's what I did. And this is one thing about life. This is why you always must be ready. Always be ready. Never get ready. People go, oh, hey, what are you training for, David? I ain't training for shit. When something pops up, I'm ready. So when Cam popped the fuck up and Cam calls, hey, man, I'm going to be in Las Vegas. You want to go for a run? Sure do. Sure do, brother. Sure do. While the run sucked, I was ready. We ain't got some steak.
Same day.
Saying, oh, we worked it out, dude. Whenever me and him are together, you can guarantee it's going to be two people that love each other, but are waiting for the other.
How we should behave to tyrants. If a man possesses any superiority, or thinks that he does when he does not, such a man, if he is uninstructed, will of necessity be puffed up through it. For instance, the tyrant says, I am master of all. And what can you do for me? Can you give me desire which shall have no hindrance? How can you? Have you the infallible power of avoiding what you would avoid? Have you the power of moving toward an object without error? And how do you possess this power? Come, when you are in a ship, do you trust to yourself or to the helmsman? And when you are in a chariot, to whom do you trust but to the driver? And how is it in all other arts? Just the same. In what then lies your power? All men pay respect to me. Well, I also pay respect to my platter, and I wash it and wipe it, and for the sake of my oil flask, I drive a peg into the wall. Well then, are these things superior to me? No, but they supply some of my wants, and for this reason I take care of them. Well, do I not attend to my ass? Do I not wash his feet? Do I not clean him? Do you not know that every man has regard to himself, and to you just the same as he has regard to his ass? For who has regard to you as a man? Show me. Who wishes to become like you? Who imitates you as he imitates Socrates? But I can cut off your head. You say right. I had forgotten that I must have regard to you, as I would to a fever in the bile, and raise an altar to you, as there is at Rome an altar to fever. What is it then that disturbs and terrifies the multitude? Is it the tyrant and his guards? I hope that it is not so. It is not possible that what is by nature free can be disturbed by anything else, or hindered by any other thing than by itself. But it is a man's own opinions which disturb him. For when the tyrant says to a man, I will chain your leg, he who values his leg says, do not, have pity. But he who values his own will says, if it appears more advantageous to you, chain it. Do you not care? I do not care. I will show you that I am master. You cannot do that. Zeus has set me free. Do you think that he intended to allow his own son to be enslaved? But you are master of my carcass. Take it. So when you approach me, you have no regard to me? No, but I have regard to myself. And if you wish me to say that I have regard to you also, I tell you that I have the same regard to you that I have to my pipkin. This is not a perverse self-regard, for the animal is constituted so as to do all things for itself. For even the sun does all things for itself, nay, even Zeus himself. But when he chooses to be the giver of rain and the giver of fruits, and the father of gods and men, you see that he cannot obtain these functions and these names if he is not useful to man. And universally he has made the nature of the rational animal such that it cannot obtain any one of its own proper interests, if it does not contribute something to the common interest. In this manner and sense it is not unsociable for a man to do everything for the sake of himself. For what do you expect? That a man should neglect himself and his own interest? And how in that case can there be one and the same principle in all animals, the principle of attachment to themselves? What then? When absurd notions about things independent of our will, as if they were good and bad, lie at the bottom of our opinions, we must of necessity pay regard to tyrants. For I wish that men would pay regard to tyrants only, and not also to the bedchamber men. How is it that the man becomes all at once wise, when Caesar has made him superintendent of the close stool? How is it that we say immediately, Felicion spoke sensibly to me? I wish he were ejected from the bedchamber, that he might again appear to you to be a fool. Epaphroditus had a shoemaker whom he sold because he was good for nothing.